Thank you again for joining our Lower Bills Cleaner Heat webinar. My name is Amanda Barker, and I am the Clean Energy Program Manager here at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. And today we are going to be talking about how heat pump rates that have been proposed by the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources can save Massachusetts residents hundreds of dollars on their heating bills. These proposed rates are currently being investigated by the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities in docket number 25-08. And to demonstrate their importance, a coalition of organizations, including the Environmental Defense Fund, Zero Carbon Massachusetts, Rewiring America, the Acadia Center, and my organization, Green Energy Consumers Alliance, all came together to fund an independent analysis by Switchbox. The goal is to generate clear, data-driven findings on just how transformative these rates could be and why the DPU must adopt them. And this webinar is going to dive into the results of that analysis and how these rates are such a game changer for clean heat in Massachusetts. In case you're not familiar with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, we are a nonprofit organization based in both Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And our mission is to empower consumers and communities to speed a just transition to a zero carbon world. We do this through both clean energy educational programs and advocacy, such as this webinar here today about heat pump rates. Just to quickly go over some Zoom basics, everyone will be muted throughout the webinar. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation. If you do have a question, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will have multiple presenters today, so if your question is about a specific presentation, please indicate which presenter you're asking the question to. If you would like to use closed captions, you can click CC at the bottom of your screen to enable those. And then lastly, we will be sharing the slides as well as a recording of the webinar to the email addresses that you used to register today. Agenda for today. First, we're going to start off with an introduction to heat pump rates, their importance for affordability, and why we can't wait to adopt them. Then we'll have the Department of Energy Resources give us some background on the Interagency Rates Working Group findings and their proposed heat pump rate. Then we'll have Switchbox share their analysis and findings from their recent report. And then we'll have some partner organizations share how impactful these rates would be and go into more detail on some of the benefits. Lastly, we'll leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A and discussion. Today's guest speakers include Jolette Westbrook, who is the Director and Senior Attorney of Regulatory Solutions at the Environmental Defense Fund. Then we have Austin Dawson, the Deputy Director of Energy Supply and Rates at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. We have Juan Pablo Velez, the Executive Director at Switchbox, Amanda Sachs, the Policy Associate at Rewiring America, and last but not least, Kyle Murray, the Director of State Programs at the Acadia Center. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Jolette to get us started.
Thank you, Amanda, and hi, everyone. I am Jolette Westbrook with the Environmental Defense Fund. And if you do not know, the Environmental Defense Fund is a nonprofit worldwide organization striving for maximum impact to ensure a clean energy transition, healthy communities, and the ability of people and nature to thrive. So I will tee up the discussion by giving my general perspectives as to why the report by Switchbox is so important. You will, as Amanda indicated, you will then hear from other speakers who will talk about the specifics of the report. Just to make sure that my comments are in context, I want to just say that the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources has requested the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities to adopt a 2.0 heat pump rate. And the Switchbox report demonstrates that the use of this 2.0 rate would result in significant savings for customers. And I just wanted to highlight the 2.0 because you'll see that in my slides, and I really want to make sure that I'm clear. Next slide, please. So why is this Switchbox report so important? Because, in my opinion, in Massachusetts, we just can't wait. We have very high utility rates in Massachusetts. And from the slide, you can see that low-income customers, as well as other customers, are facing arrearages. This is not sustainable. Energy affordability is the foundation that brings together all of the Commonwealth's policies and equity goals. If we do not figure out the affordability issues, we may diminish the likelihood that we will reach our climate goals in Massachusetts, something that we do not want to see. We want to make sure that we reach our climate goals in a timely manner. Next slide, please. So what can we do? We have to eliminate the barriers to heat pump adoption. That is one key thing that we can do now. And how do we do that? Well, one way is to get to the bottom of the hard questions. And I think the report by Switchbox addresses some of those hard questions. And we also need to make sure that the heat pump rates work in tandem with other low and moderate discount rates, and that mechanisms are put in place to ensure access to heat pumps. All customers need to have access to heat pumps. We also need to make sure that we educate customers regarding heat pumps and their benefits. We need to ensure that there are coordinated and effective education measures. I will note that in New York, EDF found that only 1%, let that sink in for a second, 1% of heat pump adopters are enrolled in the utility rate designed to save them money. That left $131 million in bill savings unrealized. Next slide, please. Massachusetts can certainly learn from the example in New York, and we can make sure that we have coordinated messaging. We need to start with the basics. What is a heat pump? What type of heat pump would be most beneficial for a particular situation? How do I install a heat pump? How can I afford to install a heat pump? We must have the information available so people know the incentives that they can use, and we must all give the same message. It is so confusing if we are not on the same page. If advocates have a different message from, or utilities have a different message from advocates, if advocates have a different message from policymakers, etc. There are some basic messaging that we all should be using to help customers understand what is at stake and how they can save with heat pump rates, and how they can improve health benefits and environmental benefits by using heat pumps. Next slide, please. So to determine the next steps, I think it's important that we look at what we know. The Switchbox report identifies significant 2.0 rate cost savings. We know that Massachusetts customers need rate relief. And the report demonstrates that heat pumps are a smart financial move for most homeowners. And I do want to emphasize this includes low and moderate income customers. And as I indicated before, heat pumps provide health and environmental benefits. Next slide, please. So we have a big decision to make in Massachusetts. We have facts. We need to rely on those facts and urge the decision makers to make the right decision and adopt the 2.0 heat pump rate that will benefit homeowners in Massachusetts. So next, I will stop there and we'll turn it over to Austin. It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Gillette, and thank you to the Green Energy Consumers Alliance for hosting this webinar and the many organizations that Amanda walked through to work on this issue. My name is Austin Dawson, and I work at the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources as a Deputy Director of Energy Supply and Rates. As a state energy office, DOER is the primary energy policy agency for the Commonwealth and develops and implements policies and programs to create a clean, affordable energy future. And heat pump rates are a key strategy to advance this future. The Healy Driscoll administration's energy affordability agenda, announced earlier in March of this year, similarly recognized the opportunity that heat pump rates provide. Next slide. So prior to that announcement, DOER actually had been collaborating with other state agencies under the name of the Interagency Rates Working Group. The IRWG conducted robust stakeholder engagement and explored rate designs that could address these dual issues of affordability and also decarbonization. And in that work, the IRWG recommended all EDCs offer heat pump rates as near-term solutions to address the disincentive for customers to transition to heat pumps under our existing electric rates. And so as a point of comparison, our current electric rates shown in the chart below, only showing the delivery rate, so not a supply rate alongside those delivery charges. Broken down here by distribution in blue, transmission in green, and other charges on our delivery rates in yellow. Next slide. So what is a heat pump rate? The heat pump rate provides a fundamentally lower electricity rate during the winter for customers with a heat pump compared to standard customers. So for example, the heat pump rate 1.0, the chart or graph to the right upper hand, shows the standard delivery rate for a standard residential customer as a dashed line, and the lower delivery rates charged during the heating season from January to April and November and December. The rate is adjusted by reducing only the blue or distribution portion in the heat pump rate 1.0 model. The cost of delivery, including the distribution and transmission systems, though, are driven largely by our peak demands or instantaneous peak on the system, rather than the amount of energy transmitted through the system. And our current system is purpose-built for our summer peak demands, enabling incremental winter use without additional cost on the system. And many of those other costs, including policy charges and programs, those shown in yellow, recover the costs for our essential affordability and climate programs, but many of those don't relate to the energy use of an individual customer paying their bill. So all told, the cost for electricity in the winter is higher than it needs to be or would be in cost reflective rates, and is an existing barrier for more widespread adoption of heat pumps. These heat pump rate 1.0s to the upper right, have been approved by the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, or our state regulator, both for Unitil and National Grid. And the IRWG's recommendations, and ultimately DOER's petition to the DPU, recommended the evolution to these heat pump rate 2.0s, which adjusts not only the blue distribution components of the delivery rate, but the other delivery rate components, including the transmission charge and many of the other charges within the yellow component. You can see as a comparison between heat pump rate 1.0 and 2.0, the increased, or rather the reduction of that electricity rate in the winter, making efficient electric heating more affordable. Next slide. To implement those recommendations, DOER requested the DPU open an investigation on heat pump rates and adopt those heat pump rate 2.0s, which meant that Unitil and National Grid would need to evolve to heat pump 2.0 rates from their current heat pump rate 1.0s and direct Eversource to file the heat pump rate for review. Eversource, the DPU directed Eversource to file a proposed heat pump rate, which has been submitted and is awaiting for a final decision from the DPU. And simultaneously, the DPU has opened an investigation into whether all EDCs should implement these heat pump rate 2.0s, as we're discussing today. And we're currently waiting next steps following a public comment period. Thank you for your time and having me here to speak about the role that DOER and the Interagency Rates Working Group has played. And I'll pass it on to Juan Pablo from Switchbox to share more about their research and findings.
Hi, everybody. Juan Pablo Velez from Switchbox here. We're a nonprofit research group that helps advocates run the numbers on policies like these heat pump rates. So Austin just sort of introduced what the rates are. Essentially, you say, if you have a heat pump and only if you have a heat pump, we will charge you less during the winter if for the poles and wires, not for the electricity you consume, just for the grid. That's the 1.0 rates. And then DOER is proposing to go further. And what we'll see in this presentation is, why is that justified? And if the DPU does it, goes further, what will that do to energy affordability in Massachusetts? That's what we're about to see. Okay, and I'm going to frame this whole talk in terms of some of the kind of conventional wisdom that you'll hear out there in Massachusetts and frankly in all cold states about heat pumps. So you'll often hear that heat pumps just can't compete against natural gas. And the first thing we did in this research was just to check if this was true. Turns out it is in fact true. About 27% of all the households in Massachusetts of all the households heated by natural gas in Massachusetts, which is not all of them, it's about half of them, about 27% of them, their bills go down after they get heat pumps. So you take out your gas furnace or boiler, you get heat pumps, and in about a quarter of the cases, your bills are lower afterwards for the whole winter, which is what we want to see. But about 43% of the time, they go up, and 30% of the time, they go up more than $1,000 over the whole heating season, which works out to over $100 a month, which is not so good. So this is sort of our visualization that shows it is in fact true that it's only advantageous, it only cuts your heating bills basically about a quarter of the time if you're on natural gas. And that's under the current electric and gas rates, the sort of default ones. And I'm pointing that out just because it'll become important in a little bit. Let's look at a second commonly held belief, which is that there's already high energy burdens for low-income folks. Energy burdens just means that you're paying too much of your income for energy, and that heat pumps will make that worse. So let's check if that's true. Turns out it's false. The way that affordability is commonly measured by policymakers is there's this concept of an energy burden. In this case, this line represents if a household is above the line, it means that they're paying more than 6% of all their annual income on their heating bills. If they're below the line, it means, okay, they're paying less than 6% of all that income on their heating bills. So let's see where we are at currently. So this is with with the current HVAC systems that are out there. Before, most folks don't have heat pumps. They have furnaces and boilers, and some have electric resistance. So if we just ask the question, how many people are overly burdened right now, this is what we get. About 1/3 are under that threshold, and 2/3 are above it. And this is just for winter energy costs. Normally, when you look at energy burdens, you want people to be under 6% for all their energy costs. So that should include summer cooling bills, and even gasoline consumption. So that means that this is just for winter, which means folks are even more burdened than this year round. One thing folks might know is Massachusetts does have a discount on both your gas and electric bills if you are low income. And the estimate is that about half of the population who could get that discount is getting it right now. And that's reflected in these numbers already. So this is with the current discount enrollment that we have. What would happen if everybody switched to heat pumps? Well, it would be an opportunity to get everybody on those rates. So the state would have to make it so that not only if you're low income, not only do you get, when you get a heat pump installed, you would also get auto enrolled into the low income discount you're already eligible for. And if we do that, then about half of folks would end up under the 6% burden, and a little under half would end up above it. So it would already be an improvement, actually. And you might say, well, you're cheating. It's because you're assuming that you can magically have more enrollment in low-income discounts when you have heat pumps. Well, first of all, it is an opportunity, but even if you don't do that, it turns out that the burden is about the same before and after heat pumps for this population. That's mostly because there's a lot of electric resistance and other expensive fuels in this population, and because of the discounts that they already are eligible for. Okay, and then the third thing you hear is, hey, all these bad outcomes, it's all because natural gas is really cheap. It's cheaper than electricity. And that's false. And if you take away one thing from this presentation, it's false because heat pumps are currently being overcharged. So we're about to walk through what that means. This is the kind of typical bill across, if you look at across all the households in the state, given whatever HVAC they currently have, this is how much they're paying on average for their electric bill. They're paying about $880 on average for supply. This is for just the electrons. And then another about $1,000 for delivery. This is their share of the payments for the grid that bring those electrons to the building. This is just for the winter. Now, here's what happens when that average household gets a heat pump. They're consuming about twice as much electricity. That's the orange part. You see, it kind of gets twice as big, and that makes sense. They're consuming more electricity, so they should pay for more electricity. Okay. But they're also paying twice as much for the grid. And that doesn't necessarily make sense because right now in winter, the grid is only 80% capacity. It's built for the hottest days of the summer when everybody's running their one-way heat pumps, also known as air conditioners. And most folks don't have electric heating. And so at winter, there's a lot of spare capacity on the grid that we're charging, and we're charging folks as though there wasn't. We're saying, hey, if you use that spare capacity, we're going to double how much you have to pay for the poles and wires. So that's the delivery charge doubling. And this doesn't necessarily, when you do that, you actually push down everybody else's payments. So when we say heat pump customers are subsidizing everybody else, and therefore they're being overcharged, this is why it happens. Let's say you have a typical block here. It's heated by natural gas. Those are the little, every home is heated by natural gas. Those are the little blue gas meters, and then they all have an electric connection. In this contrived example, they're all paying the exact same amount they're all consuming the same amount of electricity. So they're all paying the same amount for the poles and wires. So let's say that this, they're covering the cost of these poles and wires you see here, and they're splitting it evenly. They each cover a piece of those costs because, the utility upgraded this feeder in the past few years. They're still paying back the banks for it, and so we're helping them pay it back, essentially. Now, keep your eye on the little house that turns orange. It swaps out the gas for a heat pump. And when it does that, it ends up consuming twice as much electricity, and so it pays twice as much for the poles and wires. But because there's no need to upgrade the grid. Check out what happens to the payments there. That extra payment ends up squeezing down everybody else's payments because it's a fixed cost. We're just paying back the grid we already have. That's why a subsidy occurs. Okay, so what if we fix this overcharge? What would that look like? Well, it would look exactly like the rates that DOER is proposing. So this is our bill, our typical bill post installing air source heat pumps again. The 1.0 rates that the DPU has already ordered the utilities to go ahead and do lowers the total bill by about 12%, which is a good start. But if you actually try to make the delivery charge, the little light blue box, roughly the same size as it was before people electrified, so they're not paying more for poles and wires, then you would discount it by 23% on average. That's what happens to the typical bill under those 2.0 rates that DOER is asking the DPU to enact. And Kyle Murray from Acadia will have more to say about this in a bit. So that's what would happen to the typical bill. And then if you apply that across everybody on natural gas, here's what happens now after people get heat pumps. So this is what we are at today. As I said, only 27% of folks have their bills go down. Under the 1.0 rates, it goes to 50%. And under the 2.0 rates, it goes to 74%. Today, only 1 in 4 would have their bills go down with heat pumps when they move from natural gas. Under the 2.0 rates, it would be 3 out of 4. And it wouldn't cost anybody anything because you're just not charging them. Right now, the reason that natural gas can't compete is because you are charging people too much for the poles and wires. If you charge them the same amount as they would before, then it turns out that heat pumps can actually compete. So when you hear that, it's because that heat pumps can't compete natural gas because gas is cheap, that's not the main reason. The main reason is we are overcharging heat pump owners for poles and wires. And if you don't do that, look what happens. It flips. And in most cases, people save money. But of course, natural gas only heats about half the homes in the state. The rest are delivered fuels and electric resistance. So if you add those in, today you would already have 45% of folks saving money with heat pumps, and it goes to 82% under 2.0 rates because anybody who has an electric utility and a heat pump can use these rates even if they're not consuming natural gas. So the big kind of banner finding from our study is if you make heat pump rates fair, then 82% of households can save with heat pumps. What about LMI burdens? Let's revisit the findings we had before, right? We found out that heat pumps, if you apply the discount, you can get about 50-50, about a little over half of folks under that critical burden threshold. What about if we add 2.0 rates on top? You get 70% of all the households that make less than $50,000 a year. That's what the population is here. 70% of low-income households would now be spending less than 6% of all their annual income on heating versus 35% today. So it's a gigantic change and probably one of the most significant ways that energy affordability could be addressed in the state of Massachusetts. So let's revisit our commonly held beliefs. Heat pumps can't compete against natural gas. Heat pumps will worsen low-income energy burdens, and this is all because gas is cheap. As we learned, it's not because gas is cheap. It's because heat pumps are being overcharged. If you fix that overcharge, then heat pumps will be able to compete. In fact, they'll be cheaper than natural gas for most households. You go from 45% of households saving to 82%. And heat pumps will improve low-income burdens from 65% of households paying more than the amount we want them to be just for the heating bills, never mind for all their other energy bills. And that gets cut more than in half to 30%. We are releasing the report that summarizes all this right now. So we just hit a button that is emailing a PDF version to everybody on this call and everybody who registered. And Amanda is about to post a little link to a form because we really want to get hard copies out to the world. We printed out a few hundred copies. If you want one, it's free. Just enter in your address into that little Google form that should be in the chat, and we'll send one to you next week so you can read it at your leisure on the beach. And that's all I got. Thanks so much for your time. If you want to discuss further, feel free to reach out, give me an email, or hit us up on Blue Sky. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Sachs. I work with Rewiring America. We are a leading national home electrification nonprofit, and I lead our policy work in the Northeast. I want to give you some thoughts on why the Massachusetts Heat Pump Rate 2.0 is important beyond the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. So first, the regional view. The major investor-owned utilities in Massachusetts, which are Eversource, National Grid, and Unitil, also operate in other northeastern states. Eversource operates in Connecticut and New Hampshire. National Grid also serves New York, and Unitil is active in New Hampshire and Maine. By exporting the 2.0 rate model, these utilities can apply consistent, scalable strategies across their service areas. They'll get better load predictability, avoid infrastructure strain, and meet rising regulatory expectations on decarbonization and equity. Next slide. Very quickly, why does this matter in a climate context? Why do we push for heat pumps and heat pump rates? Scaling heat pump adoption could reduce residential building emissions by 36 to 64%, but that only happens if operating a heat pump is affordable, and that's where this rate design plays its central role. Next slide. Heat pump rates are a proven tool that states are barely using. Most utility rate structures still penalize electrification, especially for low-income households due to high per kilowatt hour delivery charges, like Juan Pablo was just saying. But Massachusetts is proving that it doesn't have to be that way. We want to spread awareness of how helpful and common sense this policy is. The 2.0 heat pump rate design is repeatable across other cold climate states that have similar energy needs, building stock, and emission goals. Today, 88 utilities across the US offer some form of electrified heating rates, but these are mostly municipal or co-op providers. Only 1 in 5 households lives in a territory with access to those electrified heating rates, and only 12 of them are tailored specifically for heat pumps. The rest are for electric resistance as well, which obviously are pretty energy intensive machines. Next slide. So only 16% of US homes use heat pumps today. To meet our national climate goals, that figure needs to triple by 2032. Upfront rebates on these heat pumps are important, but they are not enough. If the monthly bill goes up, adoption will stall. Rate reform ensures that people stay with their heat pumps after installation and are happy with their machines. Massachusetts is offering more than a pilot. It's offering a playbook that can be copied by both the investor-owned utilities that will be implementing the rate in Massachusetts and legislatures, regulators, and advocates to push for in other cold climate states. And the next slide is just my contact info. I look forward to your questions, and you can always feel free to contact me at amanda@rewiringamerica.org. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it over to Kyle.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kyle Murray. I am the Director of State Program Implementation for Acadia Center, and I am here to talk to you about why heat pump rates just simply represent fairness in rate making. Next slide, please. Acadia Center's mission is to advance bold, effective, and equitable clean energy solutions for a livable climate and a stronger, more equitable economy. We focus on 6 areas of climate and clean energy within which we prioritize consumer benefits, public health, economic growth, and equitable distribution of benefits. Next slide, please. Yeah, I don't actually have a ton to my slides, so I just have these 2 slides, and I just want to really stress that heat pump rates represent a correction for an error that has been occurring over time, that heat pump owners have been significantly overcharged for their fair share of the distribution costs and for paying for the grid. So a fundamental key to rate making is that ratepayers should only be charged for the costs that they incur upon the system. Now, according to the Massachusetts Interagency Rates Working Group, each utility's system is currently summer peaking. So the distribution system is built to serve the capacity of a peak summer day. In the winter, there is available capacity or headroom on the system, meaning that utilities are unlikely to incur incremental system costs when usage increases during the winter season in the near term. What does this mean in plain English? Basically, even though heat pump owners are using more energy than non-heat pump counterparts, they actually aren't incurring any more stress upon the grid or the system than their non-heat pump counterparts. However, because we charge volumetric rates for distribution, they're being charged significantly higher than they should be. So it's important to note, again, to stress that this does not represent a handout to heat pump owners. Like I said, given that we are still a summer peaking system, even though they're using more, it does not put extra strain on the grid. And under these volumetric structures, heat pump owners are significantly overcharged for their contributions to grid maintenance. I know I'm being repetitive here, but I think it's really important to stress that. Because we've heard things like, oh, this is just trying to get people to adopt heat pumps. This is a policy goal. No, this is a fundamental issue of fairness at the end of the day. Next slide, please. And again, this is just to reiterate what Juan Pablo was saying earlier. Under default rates, we see that 1,082 charge, and then we see under default rates, heat pump owners get charged $2,106, double, basically double what they would with non-heat pumps. But like I was saying previously, they don't actually incur really any more, system strain, grid maintenance at this time. So it doesn't really make sense to charge them double on their delivery charge. We note that the supply charge still is higher, and that does make sense. They're using more energy, therefore they should pay obviously higher supply. And the 1.0 rates do take a good step in the right direction of correcting that. It helps a bit, but it's still not fully getting at that level of fairness. It's not until we see that 2.0 rate that we accurately see a correction for these, for this overcharging that's been going on. So again, I know I'm being very repetitive with this, but I want to stress that this is fundamentally about fairness for ratepayers, for heat pump owners who are being overcharged and are subsidizing all other customers. And next slide. And again, that's my information, and I believe we're moving on to Q&A right now. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much, Kyle, and all of our presenters today. We really appreciate you joining us. We are going to go ahead and move to Q&A. So I'm going to have my colleague Kate go ahead and spotlight all of our presenters. And again, if you do have questions, you still have time to go ahead and input them into the Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to them. All right. So we got lots of questions that I know my colleagues have been working hard to answer in writing. One that I would like to answer live is from Jamie Haber. Does the LMI energy burden 70% number also take into account increased usage in summer due to the fact that heat pumps provide AC that those homes may not have had before? Maybe Juan Pablo, you would be best suited to answer that question.
Of course. So every chart you just saw is only looking at what's going on in the winter. Essentially, we're saying, how much is somebody paying for electricity, and if they use any fossil fuels during the winter? What is that number before they get heat pumps? What is that number after they get heat pumps? And they're only changing the heat pumps, by the way. So if they have a gas stove, they would keep a gas stove. If they have a gas water heater, they'd keep that. And we're just saying, if they switch out their HVAC under the default rates, what happens to all their energy payments during winter? And then what happens if they're being charged the 1.0 rates for electricity and the 2.0 rates for electricity? So we're not actually looking at the summer at all. If you already have AC, then your summer bills might go down because heat pumps tend to be more efficient than standard air conditioners. If you don't have AC, then your summer bills will go up, assuming you're using your newfound air conditioning. But that would be a good thing because it means that there's unmet cooling needs that are actually being met. But the numbers you see in the report and that you saw on the slides, don't look at that at all. They're just looking at wintertime energy costs. Hope that answers the question.
Awesome, great. Thanks, Juan Pablo. Another question we have is about the status of heat pump rates in Maine. Is anyone able to speak to that?
I can speak to that a little bit.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Sorry. Okay, I could just say that Central Maine Power, it has a pilot in Maine, and it's on a smaller scale, but they have done pretty well. I think they're the second most advanced example of a utility sanctioned rate design tailored to electrification. And in this pilot, it's demonstrated that seasonal delivery pricing can enable winter savings and support heat pump economics. The pilot obviously has limitations in its scale, but it offers a lot of valuable data. Massachusetts, I think, would be the first to implement a statewide heat pump rate for investor-owned utilities. But Colorado has legislation also that would, in the future, I think 2027, require heat pump rates. Kyle, did you want to add to that? Anything about me?
Yeah, the main pilot program was limited to 5,000 individuals. I know that the enrollment in the program was, I think it was December 31st, 2024 was the final date to enroll in it. I know that we are, as part of our advocacy, trying to get them to get Maine to expand that, to implement it on the whole. I don't know that we're anywhere near that right now, but we do know that the program was pretty successful in Maine. We're heartened by the results, but now the next step is to try and get them to roll it out statewide.
Great. Thank you so much, Kyle and Amanda. We are getting a couple of questions about how these new rates might interact with those that have solar and net metering. Does anyone want to address that question?
I'm not sure that it would particularly impact, maybe others who know more than I don't think it should have much of an impact on solar or net metering, negatively at least.
And I will jump in, Kyle, you may be right about that, but I think it highlights the point that we have to make sure that all of the rates are working together. We wouldn't want to have unintended consequences.
Thanks, Jolette and Kyle. We are getting questions about the process for how these 2.0 rates would be implemented. So I'll just clarify. I know Austin Dawson, who unfortunately had to jump off, touched on this a little bit. But basically, the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources has petitioned the DPU to essentially investigate whether electric distribution companies should be required to implement these stronger rates. They are going to implement, the 1.0 rates this winter, but should they be required to implement the stronger 2.0 rates is currently what they're investigating. And we really set out to do this report with Switchbox to prove why these 2.0 rates are so important so that the DPU opens up a formal docket to examine these rates, have a more formal process with public engagement, including intervention from different groups, and then ultimately, require that the electric distribution companies implement these stronger 2.0 rates. So right now it's still in the investigation phase where they're open for public comment. The public comment period just closed and they're reviewing, and then we're hoping that it will become a formal docket where we can formally intervene. So we'll definitely keep everyone posted on the status of the docket. I'm also seeing some questions about the National Grid and Eversource heat pump rate dockets. We can definitely include the link to those dockets in the follow-up email as well. All right. Are there any questions? We have far more than we can answer with our time left. Are there any questions that are jumping out at folks that you'd want to answer?
Yeah, I just want to jump in. There's someone who said, can you explain how heat pump users are using more energy but not straining the grid? It's a good question. And it's due to the fact that we build for a summer peaking system right now. The summer peak is where we really see like the strain on the grid. And once we hit those summer peaks, that's where the really costly investments come from. The winter peak at the moment is significantly lower than the summer peak. So even though, you're using more electricity, our grid is built for that much higher summer peak. So it's more like, just a, standard summer day than it is closer to a, really high peak day. So the winter peak is just significantly lower. So there aren't really significantly higher costs associated with that.
So we already have a grid that can accommodate a lot of heat pumps. That's what they spent the last few decades actually building out. Of course, a heat pump consumes more electricity during the winter than it does during the summer. And so if everybody on a power line that's on a local distribution line got a heat pump, they would have to upgrade it. But right now, almost nobody has heat pumps for heating. So there's plenty of capacity to go before we get to the point where we're running out of room on the existing infrastructure we have.
I just want to add that we're we're about 10 years away from being in a winter peaking situation, according to most estimates, just to put some perspective in it. So that's mid 2030s, 2035.
Great, thank you all. Another question that we have is about whether these rates are going to go into effect for commercial customers as well, or is it only residential? Is anyone able to speak to that?
I believe it's just residential at the moment. Yeah, this is planned for residential. Commercial is significantly more complicated. I think we need to take a different look at that.
There's a question about how do we ensure that LMI users actually get to 100% on the LMI rate? It's a great question, and it's the question that the state should be asking, because these outcomes only work if when somebody gets a heat pump, they get enrolled into the heat pump rate, and they get enrolled, if they're eligible for it, they get enrolled into the LMI discount. And so that's precisely the thing we have to figure out. I don't have the answers necessarily. It seems like it should, I don't want to foist more work on HVAC contractors. They're already plenty overworked, but it has to be as close to opt out as possible. It should be almost automatic, something that folks don't have to think about. They should just get what they are eligible for. So it's an open question, but I think it's the question that the state needs to answer.
And I think there are things you can do, you can look at things like auto enrollment. You can look at reducing administrative burden. That's some of the things we see at times is that, individuals have to provide income verification and these sorts of things, and that can take time and effort for people who don't have a lot of time and effort. A lot of time to be able to spare on something like that. And yeah, that's kind of the big thing for me is just like I'm a big fan of auto enrollment for these types of things. Speaking personally.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, go ahead, Juan Pablo.
We have some friends from the geothermal industry here, and whenever we do a report that only focuses on air source heat pumps, which is almost every time, they're like, wait, what about ground source? Which is a fair question. So if we make rates fair for heat pump owners, we should get more heat pump adoption. If we do that, then we'll make the winter peak happen sooner, right? Because you get more people electrifying in the line, it starts to eat up the capacity of the line, and at some point we do have to upgrade. And all else equal, we want to delay that day of reckoning, because the longer we delay it, the more people we electrify, and the slower the peak grows, the more we can have rates go down for everybody instead of up. Geothermal, what's really cool about it is the operating costs are super, super low, lower than air source heat pumps, and they would benefit from this rate as well. So we didn't run the numbers, but all the numbers you saw about like how many people would save money compared to natural gas, they would be even better, right? So it's like there would be almost nobody left who wouldn't save money by going from natural gas to ground source. And the people who save would save a lot more. That would all, you can just kind of picture that in your mind. So we didn't look at like grid impacts. We're just looking at, in the short term, what can we do to fix this fairness issue? But it is true that, you know, if what the state wants to do is make sure the peak doesn't grow too quickly, that ground source heat pumps should be in the mix, and we should support them.
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Another question we're getting is whether or not separate metering of heat pumps is required to implement this rate. Kyle, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, the answer is no. For, you know, because it's not trying to look at very specifically your heat pump electric use. It's for the purposes of being administratively simpler. It would just be your electric delivery rate in the winter would be lower overall.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Another question we are getting is, what are the chances that the 2.0 rates are approved for this winter? Other folks, please feel free to jump in, but my understanding is it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but it does seem more likely that should they go into effect, it would likely be winter 2026. Because right now it's just under investigation. It hasn't started a formal docket yet. But Kyle, do you have more to add there?
Yeah, I'll say that the DPU very sort of specifically said we're not doing anything. We're using 1.0 rates this winter because we just went through this whole lengthy process. We're not going to just throw that out. Could they reverse course? I mean, it's possible, but I'd say that's incredibly highly unlikely.
There's a question from Edward Quinlan that I think is super important because it kind of gets to the heart of why we think this is a fairness issue. So Edward asks, if the delivery rates, so the rates that people pay for poles and wires, go down with 2.0, and revenue from heat pump users goes down accordingly, won't the cost the default rate customers go up, assuming the overall costs of the grid are somewhat fixed? Yes, if that happened, then yes, but this is the key point. Revenue from heat pump customers wouldn't go down. It would stay about the same. The idea is this: if you double your electricity consumption and you don't change the amount of cents you're paying per unit of electricity, then you're doubling the amount you pay for the grid. But if you shrink that, then you're still paying, you have way more units of electricity, you're paying less for each of them. And the way the 2.0 rates were explicitly designed is so that it would work out to about the same payment. So the cents per unit of electricity is going down, but the amount of electricity is going up, and it works out by design to being about the same payment for poles and wires. Households would pay about the same before and after they electrify. Like that's the discount isn't so high that you overshoot it, and all of a sudden the total amount of revenue you're getting from folks who electrify are going down. It's the Goldilocks amount. That's the kind of key insight.
Amanda, I'd like to jump in now. I've been trying to answer in writing some of the questions. I'm Larry Cretion with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, and we're kind of getting flooded with some questions about should we be more concerned about increasing the winter peak? And we tried to be brief with the slides to get everybody in and out within an hour. What's important to understand is that in about 3 or 4 years, everybody in Massachusetts should have an advanced meter, a smart meter, and we should have new rate structures in place by then. The Department of Public Utilities is probably a couple of years away from really digging into that. We might have time varying rates. We might have all different kinds of suggestions for how to manage summer and winter peak loads and so forth. And what the Department of Energy Resources is suggesting is we can't wait until we have those meters in place and fancy new rate systems, that this seasonal heat pumps program can work for a period of time, 3 or 4 years, provide a great transformation of the marketplace for heat pumps so we can get them in, work for consumers so that they can save money on oil and gas, propane, or switching from electric resistance heat. It's going to win for a few years, and things may change. The world is changing as we add EVs and add heat pumps and so forth. So I guess our message here is this is a great reform in our opinion, but be ready. There will be more changes over time, and we'll be back and we'll be talking about those. And eventually, when we get to that winter peak, things will change again. But it's been said a few times that winter peak is not going to be here for several years. We need to manage for the long term, but we also have a lot to manage over the next 5 years. DOER says, and we would agree, that this policy is necessary if Massachusetts is going to achieve its goals for greenhouse gas reduction by 2030 by getting the heat pumps in, and it's going to save people a lot of money, as Juan Pablo has shown us.
Great. Thanks so much, Larry. And thank you all so much for your questions. We really appreciate you joining us today to learn more about how much of a game changer these stronger heat pump rates can really be. We hope that you leave this call feeling more hopeful and excited about the future of clean heat in Massachusetts. Just as a reminder, the DPU is currently investigating these stronger rates in docket number 25-08. And we need you all to help share this report and its findings to really keep the pressure up on the DPU as to why they should adopt these stronger 2.0 rates. As I said earlier, Green Energy Consumers will keep you posted as the docket progresses. We will also send links to the dockets in our follow-up email. And again, the report is in your inbox now, and then we'll be following up shortly with a recording of this webinar. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.